Welcome back to another episode of Prospect Watch presented to you by the Rookie HQ. And we're here to do what we always do. We're going to talk about some rookies or a rookie, the rookie, one of my favorite rookies, however you want to slice it. This is a guy that I'm really excited about, been really excited about. And I continue to be really excited about him post combine because now he's proven all the things that we've alluded to prior to, with just his football. Now we get to talk about how athletic he is in addition to all of his football prowess. So today we're going to talk about my wide receiver 9 in this 2026 class. We're going to talk about Ted Hurst. I'm really excited about Ted Hurst, former Georgia State, former Valdosta State. Let's not disrespect D2. Shout out to D2. As you can see, I rep it proudly. And we're going to talk about first how he broke out of Valdosta State. He had 596 yards and 4 touchdowns. Then we're going to talk about how he transferred up, bet on himself, landed at Georgia State, and then put up a 900-yard season as a junior, and then went over 1,000 yards this year in 2025, coming into 2026 to strengthen his case to be an NFL receiver. So with Ted Hurst, there's a lot to like. There's the explosive ability after the catch. There's the high point contested catch aura at the catch point, to borrow a phrase from my good buddy Dustin Mall, the Devy Dojo, the Devy Sensei, I believe he is. I borrowed that term from him because it perfectly encapsulates Ted Hurst's skill set. Ted Hurst, 6'4", 206 pounds, confirmed at the combine. Now, he was only listed at 185 at Georgia State, so somebody's been eating their Wheaties and saying their prayers, but he's shown up over and over again, and the questions about the competition level, he answered those at the Senior Bowl. The questions about his route running, he's got several instances, as you'll see, of him being able to break off routes. And then when all that doesn't work, he still says it's my ball or no ball. So he's one of the best contested catch receivers in the class. So you have this profile that's very, very nebulous. It seems like he's not going to be able to translate to the NFL because he played at a small school, because he doesn't have the details, the nuance of route running. He doesn't have all the things that you would want from a big time. The only thing that he doesn't have is the fact that he didn't play at a Power 5 school. So he never got to that level of competition. But when he did play against that level of competition, he played really well. I mean, go check out the tape against Vanderbilt. That was a point and a moment in time where you were wondering if he was a guy. And then if you were so desperate as I was to watch, Eli Stowers and Vanderbilt, then you watched that Georgia State game and you came away thinking, oh, that dude from Georgia State is doing some really, man, I gotta. So I wrote him down in the book of secrets, and now here we are. He's not a secret anymore. He's your favorite podcaster's favorite sleeper wide receiver in this entire draft. But let's get back to just what all Ted Hurst is able to do. So here's the problem. He was abysmal against man coverage this year. And I think that's more so a function of the quarterback play and the schematically what he had to overcome. So 1.87 yards per route run, 70% contested catch rate versus man coverage, and a 35% target share, but only a 50.3 passer rating when targeted against man coverage. Now, he did average a 14 average depth of target, but those are not numbers to write home about. Now, let me give you a large picture and talk to you about what he does really well. So he dominated against zone this year. 2.97 yards per route run, 67% catch rate, a 62% contested catch rate. The ADOT drops down to 11.8. He only had 2 drops, and he had 26 first downs against zone, 14.6 yards per reception. And although the passer rating wasn't much better, but that has more to do, again, with his quarterback than it does with Ted Hurst. So we're talking about a guy, he commanded a 30% target share. against zone this year. So he was a focal point of their offense. He went 71 receptions, 1,000 yards, and I believe 6 touchdowns. So you have a guy who's dominating against a lower level of competition, some would say. It's always funny when I hear people say that, because most of the people saying that could not, they get cramps in their hamstrings and have to bend over to tie their shoes. So that's a different story for a different day. So Ted Hurst is, again, one of my favorite receivers. A 59% contested catch rate, 49 first downs, and 22% deep route target share. That's air yards of more than passes that travel more than 20 air yards, and a 40% catch rate on deep targets. So a lot like, I've already compared Carnell Tate to George Pickens, so I'm not going to do that here. But much like much like George Pickens, he does great work outside the numbers, and he's going to come in early and be a contested catch threat, a weapon, a guy, a 50-50 ball guy. A lot like, so if you remember when Cortland Sutton was a young player, Chris Harris said, hey, the one thing that this guy can do extremely well is he wins 50-50 balls like nobody's business. And that's the calling card that I think Ted Hurst could hang his hat on early in his NFL career. But there's so much more. He's one of the best yak receivers in the class. So that's yards after catch. That's the ability to generate more yardage after the ball is thrown to you and you catch it. He's one of the best at that. He tested 4.42 in the 40-yard dash at the combine, along with an 11-foot broad jump, 11-foot 3-inch broad jump, okay, and a 36-inch vertical. So we've got all the signal that we need to know that Ted Hurst is extremely athletic. And now there's no more questions about whether or not he's going to be able to translate to the NFL. We have it now. A 6'4", 206-pound receiver who's great after the catch, who's also tremendous at the catch point, who's also running detailed routes, so where he's able to fake defenders using head fakes and foot fire and different types of releases. So this is a bag that people don't give him enough credit for, because obviously I don't blame you. You're not going to watch a ton of Georgia State, but any time that you put the film on, he pops off against everyone. And it's not just a matter of if he's able to translate. Now we're just waiting on the draft capital. So like I said, with Ted Hurst, let's go back to the top. So started out at Valdosta State. He was a consistent vertical playmaker, 38 receptions, 596 yards, and 4 touchdowns, 15.6 yards a catch. Then he transfers to Georgia State. Hey, I'm going to bet on myself because this gives me a better chance to get to the NFL. Ted Hurst developed in one of the most productive receivers in Georgia State history, first team all Sun Belt, and became the first player to be named to Bruce Feldman's Freaks list, which, again, going back to the combine, we know now that he's one of the most athletic receivers in the class. 11-foot broad jump, 4.4, 240 at 6'4", 206 pounds. Okay. Then he goes over 71 receptions, 1,000 yards, 6 touchdowns, as we went over before. Okay. And then he's now placed top 5 in multiple career receiving categories. And again, this is one of my favorite receivers in the draft cycle. So we're talking about a guy, the low end comp for him, honestly, is potentially a guy like Josh Reynolds, who it might not happen from the standpoint of consistently being a fantasy relevant player. I mean, Josh Reynolds had pockets with the LA Rams where it was okay for a certain period of time, but it's just not the outcome that we want. And then there's kind of the median middle outcome. I think that's a guy like Michael Gallup. Michael Gallup was a great contested catch guy, great boundary receiver, great compliment to a guy like Amari Cooper, who was going to do more work in the slot and then off the ball as a Z receiver. And the high end comp gets very aggressive. And I kind of alluded to it before, but the high end comp would be Cortland Sutton. This is a guy who, suffered through just horrendous quarterback play through the beginning of his career, gets 1,000 yards his second year, tears his ACL, then just kind of wastes away some valuable years of his career before he gets Russell Wilson, who then is able to throw him touchdowns, and he becomes one of the best red zone receivers in the league, which is what Chris Harris tried to tell you as a rookie, but he had developed the whole skill set. So if everything comes together, if Ted Hurst gets reliable quarterback play and is able to refine his route running a little bit more with the detail that it requires to be a master of the craft at the NFL level, I think Courtland Sutton is the comp that I could use, but he's a little bit faster, a little bit more sudden than Courtland Sutton. But that's the outcome that I would tie myself to, and I'm hoping for with a guy like Ted Hurst. So let me know your thoughts. Please tell me what you're thinking about Ted Hurst. Do you think the Courtland Sutton is is that off? Do you think that he's more along the lines of Josh Reynolds? Do you think that the landing spot is where it's going to be make or break for him? Obviously, it's make or break for a lot of people, but are you going to be willing to bet on the talent if he gets less than ideal draft capital? So leave it in the comments. Like, download, subscribe if you made it this far. Just always remember, there's ball watchers and ball knowers. And if you're a ball knower, you love Ted Hurst. Until the next video, I'm Chef GPT, and I'm out.